So today is May 7th, 2021. It's just after 1 p.m. There are 32,356,034 total COVID cases in the US, 601,603 total cases in Wisconsin, and 6,877 deaths in Wisconsin. Currently, 32.8% of the US population is fully vaccinated. So today I'm interviewing Kathy Volkmann. So Kathy, do you mind sharing some demographic information for this study, such as race, ethnicity, age, and gender?
Sure. I am Caucasian, American of German descent. I am 50, almost 58 years old. Did I miss anything?
You're good. Where do you live?
I live in Wausau, Wisconsin.
And when you first learned about COVID, what were your thoughts about it, and how have your thoughts changed over time?
Well, I think when most people first heard about it, you thought, wow, that's a sad thing to happen in another part of the world. And when it got here in the United States, it was a little scary. And I distinctly remember being very concerned when there were like a dozen cases, and what we wouldn't give for those days again. And of course, the more people who got it and the closer it got to Wisconsin, the more scared I got. Because as someone who's interested in history, I absolutely knew about the 1918 pandemic and what havoc that brought to the country and how many people died.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, do you see any parallels between that pandemic and this one?
Well, I am not a history professor or in the medical field. Just from a bit of reading that I've done, I think they probably handled it a little bit better than we did with the resources they had. My mother was alive during that. She was very, very young. She did not have a memory of it. But even reading in the Wausau newspaper, so many people died. What's the parallel other than it swept through really fast, and I think a lot faster than people thought it would. And even then, I know there were disbelievers. And I think just like now, that only perpetuated the spread.
Yeah, that's great. Or not good, but
Right.
it's good that you're making parallels. So where do you work, can I ask?
Sure. My full-time job is at Clover Belt Credit Union in Wausau. I am a vice president of operations and compliance. And I also have a volunteer job that I've had for almost 40 years at the Marathon County Historical Society here in Wausau.
Yeah, COVID must have really impacted your work, both at your credit union and the museum. I know with some work being able to be done online and others not. How has online working changed what you do on a day-to-day basis?
At the credit union?
Yeah, either the credit union or museum. Or...
Sure. Well, at the credit union, just like in most places, our closure of our lobbies came very suddenly. We had been talking about it and then thinking it was going to come someday, and then that day was today, and it happened very quickly. Having people working remotely was not something that we really did at all, and it was a challenge. You don't plan to need laptops for so many people. Luckily, we were able to secure some at Best Buy before the rest of the crowd got them. But it turned out that working remotely worked pretty well. At a financial institution, everybody can't work remotely. The tellers have to be here. People have to be here to answer the phones. So it was a challenge, but I think we met the challenge and it worked out okay. As far as the Historical Society is concerned, that's not a place people have to go, like going to your financial institution. We did close the Historical Society back in March of 2020 to the public. We still have a skeleton crew of staff who works. So there really wasn't a lot of remote working going on, that we needed to still support our customers, because you really don't have that at the Historical Society.
Do you think, like, looking to the future of the museum, like, is it open or it's still closed? Is there any plan, like, for how you're gonna proceed with the museum after COVID kind of starts dwindling down?
Start to subside. We are still closed. We are working on a reopening plan. I don't know when that is going to be implemented. And we really don't have a large staff. There's only a handful of people who work there anyways. Probably half of them, if not more than half, are still working in the office. Some people are able to do some things remotely. But it's going to be interesting, I think, when we open the Historical Society, to see if we have a huge influx of people because they finally, they have a place to go and something to do, or if people are still going to stay away.
Yeah, that's
The Historical Society has really gone digital during this whole pandemic, because we really have no way to connect with people otherwise.
Does that include like a lot of Facebook groups or online?
But we have a research library that helps a lot of people doing historical research, family history research, things like that. And we also had a series of programs called History Speaks that were live programs that we did. People could come to the Historical Society, usually once or twice a month. We would have 100 people at each of the programs, and that just totally stopped. And really the only way we had left to connect with people was to do it digitally. So we, Historical Society staff, and we engaged some outside speakers to do YouTube and Facebook Live videos with us, and to do some recorded programming that we share. And it's gone over really well. So, before, where if you missed our program on a Saturday afternoon, you just kind of missed the program when it was live. Now those programs are archived so people can watch them anytime they want. So we kind of took a bad thing, a hard thing, and turned it into something that really made us better than we were before. We now have a pretty strong digital presence presenting our history.
That's I love to hear that. I remember you mentioned archives, and I'm very curious, how do you think in the future maybe a museum exhibit would handle looking back at COVID?
It's a very good question. And I know a lot of museums, large and small, have been trying to figure out what to do with it. Typically our museum does not collect things as an event is happening. But I think this is going to be probably one of the first times that we're going to do that, because, well, for one, and I'm the curator of artifacts there, so my job as in that volunteer position is to make sure that we are collecting the history of our area. And I've been saving my own things as we've been going along to add to the collection. And I really think it's important in exactly what you're doing here, collecting the COVID stories from the people who are living it while they're living it, is really such an important thing to do. People who were in the 1918 pandemic, who were interviewed 80 years later, probably have lost a lot of the in the moment emotions and feelings and memories, and those have been lost forever. So retaining the history is really good. I'm going to say we're probably not going to do a huge amount of collecting right away, because just like all other historical events, people save their stuff from it. And I would not doubt that as the years go on, we will be offered many, many donations of masks and plexiglass shields and all the other things that go with the pandemic.
Yeah, that's very good insight. I'm curious about you mentioned like the stuff you do on a day-to-day activities. How has COVID changed what you do like recreationally, like at home?
Don't do much anymore. I've had my second shot, so and Sunday will be 2 weeks from when I have it, so I'll kind of consider myself a little bit freer from that day forward. Have done a lot of staying inside, especially in the early days of the pandemic. Usually my boyfriend and I went to a lot of live music events, and we instead pivoted to, watching Facebook Live concerts and chipping into their tip bucket that way. So we did that for a while, but it kind of gets old. There's nothing like live
Yeah,
music.
I
Um,
agree.
we still, take walks, things like that. We go to the grocery store. Um, we, might go to Target or something like that. We have not traveled to any great extent. Usually we would take several trips a year. Haven't done any of that. So hopefully this summer, we'll be able to loosen up and feel a little bit better about maybe staying in a hotel overnight, but we don't know yet.
It's difficult to kind of try to read the future, definitely.
It really is.
Yeah. Do you think what was your like one of the biggest challenges you faced throughout the pandemic so far?
Oh, geez. Probably just not continually being angry with people who are not following the guidelines from the CDC. In my personal opinion, they have only extended this and made it worse for everybody. And I try not to be an angry person, but there's a lot of people to be angry about about that.
I agree. Has COVID changed kind of how you view your community, based on how they've been reacting to the virus?
Yes, there are, and I've had this conversation with a number of people who share my view. There are a number of people who and I hate to say this, but I like used to really respect them and think they were intelligent people. And I've kind of reconsidered that in light of COVID and how certain people have responded to it and thought there were conspiracy theories and, shared totally inaccurate information that's been debunked by experts.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of room for that, like on social media groups. People I took really polarized sides on it was politicized almost. Has it
Absolutely.
changed your relationship at all with people you used to be close to, kind of like you mentioned?
Well, luckily, nobody I'm really close to has gone that way, which is good. I have kind of some, friends on Facebook who I have snoozed repeatedly because I just can't look at what's in their Facebook feed. But luckily, my core close group of family and friends really are scientifically minded and they understand what needs to be done. We might, who likes wearing a mask? Who likes staying home? But if you don't do it, it's not going to get any better.
Right,
Small price to pay in the long run.
right, I agree. Do you think like municipal leaders or government officials, like in your community, state, country level, do you have any feelings on how they responded to the pandemic?
I think locally, there wasn't a lot that could be done. In Wausau, um, the mayor put out advisories about, what they would like people to do, but there was no enforcement with it. So of course, people who didn't want to do any of it just didn't do it. I think on the state level, the governor tried and was met with resistance at every turn. And that really showed in the numbers of positive people that we had and the number of deaths that we had. I think if more had been allowed on the state level, we would not be in such a dire situation. And federally, our president sucked at this. I mean, I don't know what else to say.
There's not much else to say there. um, have you or anybody that you known gotten sick during the pandemic?
I do know several people that got sick. They had COVID. Some were asymptomatic. Some had mild symptoms. I don't personally know anybody who got horribly sick. I have family and friends who know people who did, though. I have friends who lost parents and other relatives, grandparents to COVID. I have a nephew who works in a COVID ICU in Iowa, and he saw many, 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 many people die from COVID of all ages.
It was so difficult to know, like with being symptomatic, you could kind of maybe gauge if you were sick or not, but that a lot of people were asymptomatic. That was really difficult to try and respond to try and flatten the curve or isolate because you maybe didn't even know if you
Right.
were sick.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that probably took a toll, do you think, on like people's mental health? Have you noticed anything that, if you're comfortable sharing, like with yourself or people that you know who are maybe impacted like with mental health?
Um, I I personally think I'm fine. You know, my boyfriend and I lived together, so I always had him. And even when I was working at home most days of the week, I could still come to work and I would have human interaction. I have a sister who lives in Oshkosh who totally was working at home. She was high risk, so she stayed in. She really didn't go anywhere. And it really has taken its toll on her, the lack of human contact. You know, we talked every week. We had Zoom calls in our sister group to try to stay connected, but there really is no substitute for being able to touch another human.
Yeah, I agree. And with the vaccine, I know you mentioned you got it, so there's hope on the horizon. I'm curious, how did you what was your experience getting access to the vaccine?
As I was not eligible for it until the last group, the last big group that they opened up before they made it available to everyone. I was kind of scared that it was going to take a very long time for me to get my vaccination, but the day I became eligible, I signed up with the 2 local hospitals online. I think it was on a Tuesday. That Saturday, I got a call from one of them asking if I could come in the next day. So I was shocked because other people I know who were in the original group, because they of their age, were still waiting to get a shot. So it was kind of a conundrum for me of, do I get the shot when people who should have had it 3 months ago haven't gotten it? But ultimately, and I guess I don't think it was selfish. I took the shot.
Yeah, I agree. That's
You know,
that's helpful.
the more people who get it, the better. And you know, I kind of had a brief moment of, do I really deserve this when there are so many other people who are ahead of me? But I took it.
I would have too. Um, did you have any side effects with it? I know, was it one that there were 2 doses or one
Yes,
dose?
I had the 2-dose Moderna. First one, I had absolutely nothing. The second one, I had a sore spot in my shoulder, just like you would with the annual flu shot. I had no other symptoms. I was very lucky.
That's good to hear. I know I've heard of people like on different spectrums. Like some people say it's fine, and other people I know get really sick. So
Mhm. Yes.
glad you didn't have any bad side effects. Um, what have been your primary like news sources during the pandemic?
Mainstream media, you know, I'm not a huge news hound. I watch a national morning news show on television every day. I watch, you know, look at CNN in my Facebook feed. Um, my boyfriend shares important things. I do every day look at the COVID numbers that the state puts out to see what the trends are doing.
I guess that's probably something that's changed with like your news source. Now there's something new to look at with COVID and their numbers. Do you think there are important issues with the media and what they might be covering and not covering and how that's changed people's opinions over the course of the pandemic?
Um, like about COVID and COVID specifically, or
Yeah, or wherever. I mean, with we talked a little bit about increased polarization and how it was politicized. And do you think the media could have done a better job handling that?
um, well, yeah, I'd like to think they've done what they could. You know, the media is just as polarized as the people. Um, I think the not mainstream media, you know, some of the things, media sources that have popped up, some, you know, people on Fox, I don't know that what you can even call what they report to be the actual news, because it's not fact-based. Um, but media is just as polarized. And even, you know, I will read the CNN Facebook feed. I trust them. People on the other side will not trust them. So it doesn't matter what people report, the other side is always going to not believe it.
That's a good point. Um, so do you have any thoughts on how this experience overall has transformed your life, maybe looking to the future and how you might live differently because of it?
just had this conversation with my boyfriend earlier this week. You know, we talked about what life was going to be like when we were given the all clear by the CDC or the state health department. And we kind of concluded that we probably will still mask for a while. You know, who knows how long if we're in a large crowd. You know, we usually go to the concerts on the square, which is a big summer concert series in Wausau, where, you know, 2,000 people might show up for an outside concert and you're all just sitting in your lawn chairs. I don't know that I would even be comfortable sitting there, even though I'm outside without a mask, even though I'm vaccinated. Looking forward to being with small groups of my friends again, you know, having people over for dinner, being able to go out and see live music. But, you know, I think in the back of my mind is always going to be, how big is the place that I'm going to? How many people are going to be there? And is it the kind of event that's going to draw people who aren't vaccinated and won't wear a mask?
I think it's probably going to impact us for a while into the future. So knowing what you, knowing what you do know now, how do you think this is pretty much what we just covered, but are there any other final thoughts you have on like what individuals, communities, or governments should keep in mind for the future if anyone's ever faced with this kind of challenge again?
I guess the big thing is preparation. I don't think this is going to be the last time something like this happens. Hopefully it won't happen for a long time, but I think, you know, just looking at how ill prepared so many, not just people, but businesses and governments and all over the world were for this, I think there's going to be a lot more put in place just in case something like this happens again. So it doesn't, you know, grow to be something unmanageable, that maybe in the future we'll know enough about the science, we'll have enough supply stockpiled, there won't be millions of people dying, and we'll just have a better handle on it from the start.
I hope so. I think we've exhausted pretty much all the questions I've had. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share at all?
Not really, aside from wear a mask.
Wear a mask, yes.
You know, I say that to so many people. We have to work together to get things like this under control. You need to trust the science. You need to not, you know, there are so many people who became Facebook scientists that it just astounds me. And we really just need to look to the experts to handle it when things like this happen. They're the ones who know how to make this go away the fastest, and we need to listen to what they say.
I think that's a very good note to end on, so I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you so much, Kathy.
You're welcome.